It's 5:30, so we'll call to order this meeting Tuesday, October 15th. Carl, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Remley.
Here.
Ronayne.
Here.
Lunsman.
Here.
Rife.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Bunceness.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Rux.
Here.
Mayor Schoeneman.
Here, please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to approve last week's minutes. Can I get a motion to do so?
So moved. Second.
A motion from Rux and a second from Olson. Does anyone have any changes for the minutes from last week? Otherwise, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same motion. Motion does carry. Minutes are approved. First order of business then will be the open forum. We've got Ron Krogman of the Veteran Organization presenting the state awards to the Police Sergeant Mark Miller and Fire Lieutenant Lance Hamrick. Ron, you've got the floor.
Greetings from La Sociedad de Karamjavichevo. You guys all remember what that meant, right? The organization of 40 men or 8 horses. About 2 months ago, I came before you and announced that we picked for a local Hero of the Year and Law Officer of the Year, and that their names would then be submitted onto the state. And lo and behold, they both won the state award for the 40 and 8 and we're very proud that the city of Aberdeen has such good representatives, and we send their nominations on and they get the state awards. I don't have the plaques. They're victims of the snowstorm. They were supposed to be here Saturday, but the people that had them did not make it down from Pier, and I guess I don't blame them. But we're very glad. I just want to say how pleased we are to see their names were then sent to national. We didn't win the national, but we did win the state, and that's pretty good representative of Aberdeen. There was not trying to brag. There was we had 3 things that we nominated. That was the Law Officer of the Year, the Hero of the Year, and the Voyager of the Year, the Member of the Year, and I got nominated as the Member of the Year, and I also won the state award, so we kind of swept the board at the state this year. And in talking to the police chief, I think I already got somebody in mind for the Hero of the Year next year from Aberdeen, so I'm sure that will be coming up again next fall. So at this time, I just want to bring him in and congratulate him, Lance and Mark, if you guys want to come in. I see one of them's been promoted, so it's now sergeant. But these 2 gentlemen won the state award from the 40 and 8, and I just want to congratulate them and let the people in Aberdeen know that they've got some awful good people working here in Aberdeen for them. And thank you.
And actually, gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind making your way around the dais again and shake some hands, would you? Congratulations.
Nice work. Congratulations. Nice work. Congratulations.
Anything to say? Probably not. They're taking off as fast as they can.
That's right. Some people don't want to be on television, even public access. We've got a couple of open forum speakers. But first on the docket is Betty Sheldon, here to speak on the ordinance for the conflict of interest. Betty, find your way to the microphone, and you've got the floor.
I know my way now. Thank you. This might be more appropriate later in the evening, but I just want to state my stand on the city ordinance about conflict of interest. I was here for 1 or 2 of the explanations and discussions. It was like watching sausage, and probably will be before it's finished. But my position is, I think the city of Aberdeen is a fine city. It's my hometown again now. I'm very proud of it. and of what you all do to keep it this way. And I want us to stand with the highest standard that we can put together so that we will be outstanding in the state of South Dakota, which doesn't have the greatest reputation when it comes to open government and fairness and conflict of interest. And we can rectify that, at least in Aberdeen. We can make a strong ordinance that says, yeah, we're being held to a high standard. We're holding ourselves up there. So that's my feeling, and thank you for hearing my voice.
Thank you, and you'll be glad to know that it's the very first or very next order of old business to take on next, so your words will not have been forgotten. Senator Northrup?
Does everybody have a member of or a copy of the ordinance that I've been working on? I'll pass. It's a two-page document. It's an attempt to distill what everybody's been talking about. Yeah, that's one of them. So it has been emailed out, so that's, you have one copy here, but you're welcome to have another copy. Thank you.
Senator, if you want, you can place it on the table there, and you should be able to show it on the screen as well. If you over to your right.
Thank you. We've been having discussion for about 5 weeks now, and I think we're making progress. Everybody's starting to understand what the end game is, and I agree with the prior speaker that having open government is important, having disclosure is important, having high standards, and doing everything that you do in the best interests of the citizens of Aberdeen and the city of Aberdeen. So I think everybody in the room has got that as a common foundation agreement. The disagreement sometimes is what we call the devil in the detail. In other words, what are the exact words? How do we present those concepts? So here's the progress that I think we've made. At one point, the first thing we started talking about was the standard that says greater than $100,000 coming from the city or greater than 50% of the total budget. And I'm okay with that. I think most people are okay with that as a standard. And then as we went through the discussion last time we were here, we said, let's narrow it down to just grant money. In other words, we don't want to necessarily, and I'll use Wright and Sudlow. They do a lot of concrete work on the sidewalks. We don't necessarily want to talk about the money that they charge the city for doing sidewalks. We just want to talk about the money that is granted to entities. And I have a list of that, and I think it's important that we read that list so that everybody understands who we're talking about. We're talking about the Sertoma Club. They get greater than 50% of their money from the city. We're talking by the Aberdeen Downtown Association, Wiley Park Fireworks, Boys and Girls Club, Chamber, CVB, Aberdeen Development Corporation, and the Northern State University Capital Campaign Organization. So those are what I call the 8. And then we've got 9 of you. And that's what this discussion about tonight is all about. There's 9 of you and 8 of them. They're the ones that get greater than 100,000 or more than 50%, and you are the city council. So when you guys interchange and do business, that's what we've been talking about the last couple weeks. The misconception that I hear from people on the street is when the city, most citizens think it's when the city is the city council person, which includes the mayor, is selling something to the city. But that's not been the point of discussion. The point of discussion has been not the transactions involving the city, but the transactions involving the city money after it leaves the chamber, or leaves the city and goes to example for the chamber. So whenever you have a discussion, try to clarify there's 2 completely different sets of transactions going on. When the city would do a transaction with a city council person, that's one set of rules and one set of transactions. When we get into this group, what I call the special 8, which is greater than 100,000, greater than 50%. And so that's what we're really trying to accomplish. And so if you read right here, it talks about the grant, and that's using the same vocabulary, I believe, to the best of my knowledge, that the city attorney had done also. So what this is a proposal coming from me That is, I'm asking the city council to consider this language. The goal, and I think it accomplishes what we talked about over the last 5 weeks. It was said previously by this city council that it should be all about disclosure. That's goal number one, is disclose things. And so here's what we did. We said is, in the situation, right up here at the top, it says if you 9 people, if you 9 city council people, any one of you are doing business with the 8 that we talked about a minute ago, the special 8, then you shouldn't do that. That's what it says. But then it goes on to say that we got an exception. And the exception is a 3-step process. The first step is the responsibility of the council person doing business with the Sertoma Club, the Aberdeen Downtown Association, the Wiley Park Fireworks, the Boys and Girls Club, the Chamber, the CVB, the Aberdeen Development Corporation, and the NSU Capital Campaign. So this makes your life manageable, because you know that you can take these and put them up on your mirror at home and say, if I sell to these 8 people, 8 entities, I now have violated B at the top of page 2. So it's okay to do that, because there's an exception. The first thing you have to do is if you choose to do business, and pick the Boys and Girls Club. If you choose to do business with the Boys and Girls Club, which is on this list, your responsibility, according to this proposed ordinance, is to disclose it to the public. Disclose it to the city. So you come over to City Hall, you fill out the form, and you fill out A, B, C, D, and E. And I won't read those to you. You can do that. So your responsibility is to do number 1, and then the city council's got a responsibility too. The number 2 is a joint responsibility. And it basically says the city council should come up with a finding or an opinion. And basically what the opinion is once again, and I'll just use Councilman Johnson as an example. If he was going to sell something to the Boys and Girls Club, just so I got names to put on it, then he'd come in and fill out the form, and then the rest of the council has got a responsibility. And you would have to make a decision. Was it a fair contract between the Boys and Girls Club and Councilperson Johnson? Is it reasonable? And is it in the public interest? You get the final word on that. So you're not losing that authority, you're maintaining that authority. And that's right there. And the last thing is, we're going to keep it open to the public. So the public gets a sense that that transaction was fair, reasonable, and in the public interest. So I just don't expect this to necessarily, all I'm asking for is fair consideration. The other thing is, I think it's readable. I think it's understandable. And the other thing I'd remind you is, to the best of my knowledge, no other city has gone down this path, which is fine. You're welcome to do that. And the path that no other city has gone down is the plus 100,000 greater than 50% concept of the city regulating to a usually private business what they can do with the money once it gets into their checking account. So it's okay. My point of raising that issue is, you don't have to make it perfect. You don't have to have it foresee all possible things that could happen. You just have to start with a base policy, and if that base policy is this policy that I've got here goes further than any other city in the state of South Dakota has gone. So if it doesn't go far enough for you, it's going further than anybody else has. So with that, if you got any questions, I'd be try to answer. But I guess my major point here is simplicity, so that future city council people don't accidentally violate the policy. Make it so simple you can memorize the policy and understand it. Thank you for your time.
Has anyone any questions for Senator? Thank you.
I do.
Oh,
I do.
Mr. Munson?
So I think, Senator, you were talking about that this only addressed the grants that were, my understanding of the policy that's being considered is much greater than that, in that it's dealing with conflicts that will arise out of council members doing direct business and even indirect business with entities. So does yours address that or does not?
My understanding of the prior ordinance, it does address that relationship of a city council person selling something to the city, but everything, to my knowledge, is old law. It's existing law. There is nothing new concerning the way a city council person does business with the city. Nothing new, and if there's nothing new, all we do is we make this document longer and more complicated, so there's no reason. And I really believe we should have those as two separate discussions. So I think there's a lot to be said for not trying to deal with two completely different issues at the same time.
Yeah, 6-1-1 allows for a municipal officer to do $5,000 with the city entity directly, which is ultimately what the first draft of this ordinance allowed for. So then it became a redundant matter. At the beginning, when it was a $0 matter, then it would have been more strict than the state policy. But as it stands currently in the first reading, it's identical to what is stipulated in 6-1-1.
Yeah, I don't believe that's the case, but I will take a look and see if that's.
Ron, can you speak to that?
No, I cannot. I'm not sure what version we're talking about. Are we talking about version that was not approved on last,
The version that was
2 weeks ago?
well,
Because
can you pull up the version that was approved?
I can.
Dave, is your contention that you think that it was not a $5,000 allowance on the city work, or do you think that, or you don't think that the state law
I think
allows for that?
I think 3-23-6, if I'm referring that correctly, was better in defining what a direct pecuniary interest was and also an interest in a contract than what 6-1-1 was. And so I'm not sure that, I'm not here to argue that point, but I guess I would just, I just would want to look at the differences between those to see if that is actually true or not.
And so was 3-23-6 was the one relating to school board members, or that was?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've got it here then, Ron.
So what you're looking at on the screen, what you're looking at on the screen would be that language you're talking about. This is the language that was initially adopted and approved by the council 2 weeks ago, and it's set forth in subsection A there. What Senator Nostrup was referring to was a change that I made subsequent, and we need to move through that process on turning the allocation language into grant. So it's a little confusing to be reading what we're reading here, but this is what was approved at first reading.
That $5,000 in a 12-month period is the same language that's in 3-23-6.
But does that exist in this approved version? Right, okay. So that squares it up with that.
Yeah. And I can say that the language in 3-23-7, I think, is consistent with the language in 6-1-2, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the senator while he's here? Otherwise, thank you for your time. We'll move on to the first order of business, which is something we've been very recently talking about, old business, ordinance number 19-9-3, ordinance amending the city code regarding conflicts of interest, prohibited activities of city council members, possible second reading as amended. Ron, would you tell us a few things?
Thank you, Mayor. What the council was provided, and I would remind the audience that after the approval of the first reading, because of the confusion over what was approved, I was requested to post that on the website, which I did. There was a button on the front page of the city's website to show the document as approved at first reading, and that document is what you're looking at right here. So if there is a motion to approve for second reading this document, I do have a number of recommended changes that I'd like to make right away. See if those changes will be adopted, and then further discussion would be a little more streamlined after that.
Move second reading.
Second.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, Mayor, I'll let you handle that at this
Okay,
point.
so the vote on that is what we'll do immediately?
What I would like to do
No.
is, there was a first motion by Councilman Bunceness
Yeah, to
To
open it
n-
up, to open
To
it
open
up.
up.
For discussion.
for
For
second reading,
amendments.
and second by
I did.
Right.
Renee.
So we'll need a
So,
separate motion to make any amendments to this thing.
so as we sit here today, and again, so the audience is aware, what we're looking at now is there's been a motion to approve for second reading the document that is before everyone on the screen. However, because that document did not originate with me, I have taken a look at that and will be making a number of recommendations to change that. Some are simply recommendations to kind of bring the format in line with our standard format. And I also want to inform the council and the audience that these recommendations that we're looking at here were placed on the website as well over a week ago. They've been provided to each of the council members, and the agenda packet that was published by our finance office on Thursday would also have all of these recommended amendments. So I'm hoping that everyone has had an opportunity to read those. It is about as dry as it gets, but it's the only way I can do that. So I will go through my recommended amendments to section 2-2 of the ordinance. We are not changing anything in section 2-5. But the first would be, in number 1, would be to insert as a new subsection A the definitions. And that's the changing from allocation to grant, consistent with what we've seen within the document. And then to conform the subsections and references thereafter, because now that we've inserted a new sub A, it's going to change the subsections and references after that. Item number 2 would be to replace the phrase allocation of municipal funds for the calendar year of the commencement of the contract in an amount exceeding $100,000, or which allocation represents more than 50% of the total revenues of such person, wherever it appears in section 2-2 with the phrase a grant. So the explanation is a lot more confusing than the actual changes, but we're replacing that language, and it was repeated several times throughout, and we're changing that language with just the simple phrase a grant. Item number 3 would be to, items number 3 and 4 would be to delete references to the disgorgement, which was a word that a lot of people may not have been familiar with and now are laughing at, but that's the language. And we would delete that as being outside of the authority of the council as a home rule municipality. Items number 5 would be to, we used the word person numerous times throughout the old document, and that was through the plugging in of the language from the statutes. And what we're doing with items 5 and 6 is being more clear as to who person is, whether it's a mayor or council member or the official versus person generally. Item number 7 is simply just taking out the spelled out numbers and percentages and using dollar amounts to be consistent with other figures in the ordinance. 8 would be to reformat subsection E, which will be renumbered as subsection F because of the reformatting, and assign a numbered subsection to each paragraph, and then create a new subsection G with the last paragraph, which was neither the mayor nor any city council member may participate in or vote upon a decision of the city council relating to a manner in which the member derives a direct benefit. Number 9 then would take that language in a new subsection G, and now we are putting back in language that was originally deleted in the beginning of the old section 2-2. So this language is being transferred and put in a new subsection G, and so you'll see that this language, by the way, tracks statute at 6-1-17 and is the existing language of the ordinance as we speak today. Item number 10, and I should tell you that the reason for that is that we need to have within the ordinance a mechanism for when there is a conflict. What happens then? And that's guidance to the council members as to not participating, not voting, and it allows the council to address an issue where there was a conflict of interest. Number 10 is just a simple replacement for a council member instead of council members. And then items 11 and 12 are really, again, just grammatical changes just to make sure that everything is consistent as set forth. So I've identified items 1 through 12 for recommended amendments. I'm going to take everyone now through what that looks like as a red line document. And these are my new changes. Now, what you're seeing here is the red lines to the ordinance as approved at first reading. So we have inserted a new definition of grant. We are reformatting. We are taking out the $5,000 and putting in the dollar amounts. We're taking out that language about an allocation of municipal funds and just replacing it with a grant. We're clarifying who a person is, as you see in the new subsection C. And those are the kinds of changes that are I think, fairly non-controversial. And then we have created a new subsection F because of the formatting. And as you'll see in this subsection G, all of the old language in 2-2 regarding conflicts of interest has been put back in. And we've removed the disgorgement language that you saw in violation and actually, which was up earlier in subsection 3 of the new subsection F. So again, all this redlining, for those of you who aren't familiar, can be very confusing. And so I also included a clean version of what that would look like with all those changes. And it does read smoother, I believe. Most importantly for me in printing this is the formatting is correct. And it puts us in the position where we have a mechanism to deal with a conflict, and we've not acted outside of our home rule authority with these changes. And I would request that the document that I've titled City Attorney Recommended Amendments to Section 2-2, all those changes be made, and that is the language that our finance officer would use in showing the changes in the minutes if that motion is made and those changes are approved.
I would move to adopt the recommended amendments as set forth by the city attorney.
Second.
And so we take a vote on that at this point. And a roll call vote, or was it?
Yeah, I think you probably want to.
It could be discussion, Mayor, if you.
Yeah,
you'd
why
like.
don't we? Dave, have you got some questions in particular?
No.
Does anyone else have any questions for Ron about the recommended changes that he's made to the first version that we voted on 2 weeks ago?
I guess, Ron, my question would be, with what Senator Novstrup brought up and gave us, I mean, there's obviously quite a bit of difference between that length of document and this length of document. And do you feel that that's lacking somehow, or what are you thinking there? I know you haven't had much time to review it, obviously, but I'm just curious.
Senator Nostrup's changes are significant. They delete subsections of the ordinance as you would see here, and those subsections, each one of them was basically a separate statute, and those are the statutes in 3-23 that are applicable for determining when there's a direct benefit, determining when there is not a direct benefit, and then determining the process for authorization. Another change is that what is a permissive or discretionary as far as the city council authorizing a direct benefit is made mandatory in the section, or I'm sorry, in the proposal from Senator Novstrup, where it says the city council shall authorize a person. And so those are some changes. And then again, I needed to make sure that everybody is clear that we need to keep that old language in 2-2, and that's missing, of course, from Senator Nostrup's, and I understand why that would be. But then also the provisions for violations and things like that have been deleted. So the changes between the two, I think we're almost speaking in, to some degree, apples and oranges.
So is there any content that was removed from your knowledge that is not covered by state law or our existing conflict of interest policy?
Well, again, this goes back to the fact that the conflict of interest chapter at SDCL chapter 3-23 does not apply to municipal officers. So all of those provisions would not apply to the state. Those statutes, and we're talking probably three or four statutes, have been eliminated in the version that Senator Nostrup has provided to the council. So those are changes that aren't currently applicable to municipal officials that would be made applicable if you adopt the changes. If you stayed with either the original version of the first reading or you adopted these changes as recommended.
So give us an example of something that exists in 3-23 what was it, 6 or 7, that found its way to this that would not be applicable in this circumstance?
I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to do that. I just am not in position to make that kind of a off-the-cuff remark.
Sure.
I don't know what that would be. I can show you the statutes, and arguably we could
So is
we
one
could
of
see
the
that.
big differences disclosure of that piece of the statute where how you disclose your conflict. It has to be in writing, and I don't believe I see that in 6-1. Is that correct? I don't.
That's not in 6-1.
Right.
Well, 6-1-1 is, and the
Yeah.
proceeding are specifically for business dealings directly with a municipal entity.
So is 3-23, 6, and whatever. I think they're defining what a direct pecuniary interest is in 6, and then 5, I think it's interest in a contract. So they're, I think, getting more specific, and seem to be an easier read. But, that's.
Yeah, and I think that, the big purpose, from what I gathered from what you had, how you led into this last time we had a serious discussion on the matter, was the big thing was disclosure, making sure that there wasn't inappropriate business dealings going on. And I think that this gives us a pretty good stopgap against that. It provides for control of the work that's being done for these entities that's not currently regulated in any way, shape, or form. It forces members of the council to bring that to the council for approval to make sure that those are ethical and fair dealings, and it gives a vote on it. So I think it primarily does exactly what this does. It just doesn't have a lot of the ancillary bullet points and language and redundancies of the conflict of interest policy as well as the state laws. I guess I don't see a real value in rehashing exactly what we're following in the state guidelines as it is, but adding those things probably doesn't hurt the message of this. Does anyone else have any questions or comments as it relates to either Ron's recommended changes for language and so forth, or Senator Knobstrup's proposed version?
I'm just, a question. So if we approve the changes, would this consider the second reading? Or would that alter, would that affect?
That would be the second reading, and then because they would be substantial changes, then we would have to go to another hearing for final consideration.
Okay.
And I just want to be clear with everybody, there's been this first reading and possible third reading. I know that's difficult, and I blame the legislature for that because of this wonky statute that they passed a couple years ago requiring a delay. Once there's significant changes at second reading, then there's going to be another hearing for final consideration. It is my position that the hearing must mean something, and it gives the public an opportunity one more time to come in and state their case. And if changes are decided to be made, then that is a time when additional changes can be made and go arguably onto a fourth reading, if that's how we want to talk about it. But the statute requires that there be a delayed period of time before you can do final consideration of the ordinance.
With that, Carl, why don't you give us a roll call vote to make Ron's amended changes? What's that? And that
That's
would
right.
be in a
Yep,
second
yep,
vote then?
You're right, yep.
Okay.
Councilmember Remley,
Aye.
Ronayne,
Aye.
Lunsman,
Aye.
Rife,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bunceness,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Rux,
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye. Those amendments have been made. Now, any further discussion as relates to the topic at hand with the proposed ordinance? I guess now we'll be reading from the one titled City Attorney Recommended Amendments at Second Reading, Changes Accepted.
I'll put those up for the council one last time. So before the council is the document for possible approval at second reading with the red line changes.
So no matter how this falls, it's going to require another reading in a week's time or so,
Yeah.
or how does that?
That's true, and I'm gonna ask, because of the formality that we've been following, I'm gonna ask for a formal motion on that so that we can get that on and make sure that we're covering all our bases. But assuming, if this passes, then I'll ask that formal motion.
Sounds good. Has anyone else anything to contribute as it relates to this in the time being? Otherwise, we'll take a roll call vote. Carl, for the second reading as it stands with the amendment.
Councilmember Rux,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Bunceness,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Rife,
Aye.
Lunsman,
Aye.
Ronayne,
Aye.
Remley,
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
No, motion does carry. Can I get a motion to, oh,
I move to set for a final hearing 2 weeks from today.
Second.
I'm sorry, 2 weeks from yesterday. I don't want to come back on a Tuesday.
we've got a motion from Ronayne and a second from
Hang on.
Bunceness to roll this thing out for 2 weeks for the second reading, I guess, as it's elected here today.
October. Okay.
But by way of explanation, I did make that motion with an understanding that my colleague, Mr. Johnson, will be out of town next week. Am I
That's
right
correct.
about that, Alan?
That's correct. Yeah, I appreciate the effort.
Good.
All in favor of having the second reading 2 weeks from yesterday, please say aye.
Aye.
And all in favor against, same sign. Since there's no opposition, the motion does carry, and we'll be discussing this again in a couple of weeks. Next, we've got ordinance 1910-2, ordinance amending the city code regarding required sidewalks, possible second reading. Lynn, what information have you got with us?
Okay, I believe mine will be a little bit simpler than the last one. Administration is recommending no changes from the first reading of the amendment ordinance 1910-02. There's three key elements with this ordinance change. One is it clarifies that a sidewalk is only required if there's sufficient space within the right-of-way to construct it. Number two, it increases the construction period from 12 months to 18 months, and then it deletes the section allowing a permanent exemption. It does have language that says it'll allow an indefinite extension, but we thought we should delete exemption because of changes within the municipality for build-outs and changes within zoning and et cetera.
Move second reading
Second.
and final adoption.
Got a motion from Ronayne and a second from Bunceness on the second reading. Carl, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Can I ask a quick question on this before I go? So, with Charles Hermanson who came in, that kind of started this, a little bit. What was the outcome of that?
His would be a buildable sidewalk.
Okay.
And it's going in today.
He did call last week to find out how this would affect him, and said now would obviously be a better time for him to construct rather than wait. And he did not see an advantage to waiting at this point, so.
And just in the point of curiousness about, one of his points of contention was relating to the storm sewer as it related to that area. How did that sort out?
Actually, the storm sewer was not on his lot. This was something for a neighbor's lot. So he was asking about how, if he was to put it in, how his neighbor's lot would be able to be done. Was it constructible, that sort of thing. The city has in the past done some work on those to try to accommodate that because it's drainage off of the lots versus drainage off of the right-of-way, but it's going to our public storm sewer. So we would probably end up having to build some kind of adapted structure to allow for the construction of that sidewalk for the neighbor.
Got it. So something to deal with in the future. Carl, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got ordinance 19-10-3, ordinance adopting the recodification of Aberdeen City Code, possible second reading. Ron, tell us about that.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to clarify with the council. I had been asked last week about any changes from the code book, substantive changes, and I wanted to point out a couple things. I had informed you in the first council action request that it had been supplemented 12 times. It's actually been supplemented 13 times. And I forgot that what we had done is we had rolled all of the updates and new ordinances were rolled into both the 13th supplement, and we attempted to roll those into this recodification. So there was that change of the code book to roll into what would have been basically supplement 14. So I did want to make clear to the council that has been also included in an effort to try to save a little money for the city. But other than that, I have not received any comment from any citizen on this, so I would request that you approve it at second reading.
Moved.
Second.
A motion from Bunceness and a second from Rux. Anyone have any questions for the city attorney while we're talking about it? Otherwise, Carl, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got two items of routine city business consent calendar. Notice of public hearing and tentative draft recommended versions Aberdeen City Charter considered by the City Council on November 4th, as well as licenses, a residential building contractor, and a taxi cab driver. Does anyone have anything to add or discuss on those two items?
Move approval.
Second.
Mayor, before the approval, may I put a plug in for the public hearing on the tentative draft of the recommended charter revision changes? We did have a work session, recall, about a month ago that was not particularly well attended. We would like to see if we couldn't get more of the public here. We've got a good group here tonight, and it would be wonderful to see people here to talk about the potential recommended revisions to the charter at the November 4th meeting.
Thank you, Ron. We've got a motion from Bunceness and a second from Johnson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion does carry. Next, we've got new business resolution 19-10-1R, resolution to vacate public right-of-way, Arch Street South public right-of-way between 15th Avenue and 17th Avenue Southeast, adjacent to lots 1 through 7, Block 2, and lots 1 through 4, Block 3, lots 8 through 14 of Block 1, and lots 9 through 12 of Block 4, the Melgard edition of Aberdeen 16th Avenue Southeast right-of-way. Brett, tell us about that.
I thought you were going to read a little more.
Oh, I got tired of reading. People can see it.
As it shows on your screen, this is the School for the Visually Impaired. They're requesting to vacate these non-existing right-of-ways. They only exist on paper. And the reason for the vacation, one, is there's buildings across top of it, but they're going to be building the new stadium in this area, and they need to take care of this prior to planning it. This went through the Planning Commission last month. They recommend approval, and so does staff.
Move approval.
Second.
Does anyone have any questions for Brett while we're talking about it? Otherwise, we've got a motion from Johnson and a second from Wright. Carl, would you give us a roll call vote on that?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got a resolution number 19-10-3R, resolution to establish a consolidated board of equalization pursuant to SDCL 101166, possible approval of resolution, and designate someone as the member and someone else as the alternate member. Oh, goodness.
It has been the mayor.
Lynn, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? You seem to be.
In the past, it was the mayor and the deputy mayor.
To serve as alternate designated official. But you participate with the Board of Equalization when there's appeals and complaints, and you go through those.
Fair enough.
And actually, there's a school board member also sitting on that board. So there's county representatives, city representatives, and school representatives. And it's the board's authority to look at appeals.
How often have they been meeting?
Excuse me?
How often have they been meeting? I don't think lately.
They meet probably 2 times every year.
Have they been meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. It's a cross I'm willing to bear if no one else wants it.
Leave it as is then, the mayor and deputy mayor? Okay.
That would be suitable. Dave, are you down with that?
Yes.
All right, can I get a motion to elect myself as the designate and Lensness as the backup alternate member of this Consolidated Board of Equalization?
Moved.
Second.
Got a motion from Remley and a second from Rife. Take a roll call vote on that. Carl?
Question, point of order, or whatever. Do we have to abstain from this vote?
No,
I don't
think
appointments to boards, I don't.
there's no benefit to it.
Yeah, there's really no benefit.
No, I just want to make sure.
If the envelope full of money in your car, that means we're not doing it above board, Dave.
If he files an appeal,
Councilmember Rux,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got a hearing on a special 5-day liquor license on October 16th through 20th, 2019, and November 20th through 24th for the Act 2 Incorporated DBA Aberdeen Community Theater at 415 South Main Street. Possible approval of the special liquor license. Not sure if anyone's here to speak to that.
Move to approve. Second.
Otherwise, I've got a motion from Remley and a second from Lunsman. Carl, can I get a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we'll discuss the Keole Library, Public Library contract with the Brown County for the 2020. Possible approval of the contract to provide city library services to Brown County residents from January 1st to December 31st in the amount of $12,000. Shirley, are you here to speak on that? Find your way to the podium.
I think we just can move to approve it.
Second.
Fair enough. We're trying to get Brett out of here by 7. So.
So I do have a question. I mean, this hasn't gone up in many, many years, correct?
No, it stayed the same for a long time.
So do we track county participation at the public library?
I think there's over 3,000 cards from county people right now.
Pretty stable number.
And it's gone up since we built the new library by quite a bit. And then the city does pay the county $12,000 for the museum.
Yeah.
So the library board did discuss this issue, and Councilman Rux could probably speak a little bit to that, they, in the future, may look at maybe making some changes.
Okay.
The main issue that's come up is, with the county, the 12,000, it used to be 50,000 years ago. And now it's 12,000. It's been sort of stable. But the board really did talk about the fact that, this library has become sort of a regional library, and that not even possibly in the future. And they're going to talk about it more next year, I think, when this contract comes up. If they come to us wanting to know any guidance from us on if we still want to keep the 12,000, or if there's maybe a move not to collect it, and maybe do something else if we can do something, whether it's, we give 12,000. I know Lynn's shaking his hand, but this is a preliminary discussion. So
I was just going to indicate that this board gives the county museum the exact same dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a preliminary discussion at this point, and I think there might be something next year coming from the board on.
So what you're saying is we wouldn't give the museum 12,000, they don't give us 12,000, we're in the same position.
Yeah.
It's a wash.
But it does come out of the promotions fund, so 13,000 or 12,000 would potentially go
Free up some money.
But fair is fair, even Stephen.
There was a discussion that they'd want to make sure that the 12,000 that we currently give the Dakota Prairie Museum would still, if we swapped it, that money would still stay with them, with the county, and that's where it gets a little, like you say, we don't want the county all of a sudden saying, hey, this is $12,000 extra we have. We'd still like, if at some point we ever did decide to do that, we'd still want to make sure 12,000 went to the Dakota Prairie Museum, because they do a lot of stuff with the 12,000 we give them out of the promotion.
Certainly. So we had a motion from Ronan. I didn't catch who seconded that motion over here.
I think I made the motion.
Yeah, actually, I have Bunceness as motion and
I
Ronan
second
as
his
second.
motion.
There we go. So we had a motion from Bunsen, a second from Ronan. Carl, would you give us a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Rux,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got the temporary placement of inflatable signs to provide awareness for the 2019 Special Olympic Bowling Tournament to be held November 7th through 10th at the Village Bowl. Possible approval or denial of the request for temporary placement of the inflatable sign. Brett, tell us about that.
As in past years, the Special Olympics bowling tournament is requesting to have their inflatable polar bear to advertise their event. Side ordinance doesn't permit those things, but the council has given a waiver as long as they're not using it for a commercial purpose. Staff recommends approval, as we always have.
Move approval.
Second.
Does anyone have any questions as it relates to that? Otherwise, we've got a motion from Rux and a second from Mark Remley, and all in favor.
Olson, or
Oh,
Olson?
motion from Olson, a second from Remley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion does carry. Next, we've got the letter of commitment for participation in Brown County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Possible approval of the letter of commitment for participation in the Brown County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Is anyone here to speak on that? Or Robin? Why don't you tell us about it?
The city has participated in this hazard mitigation process with the county, LEPC. Every 5 years it has to happen. I believe it's part of the federal process to allow for that grant money to come to the county so that we can start this process up again for the next 5-year process. So we recommend approval of the letter of commitment.
Moved.
Second.
Got a motion from Bunsen and a second from Johnson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Motion does carry. Next, we've got pay mill and overlay improvements, Jensen Rock and Sand, $1,128. Possible approval to pay estimate in the amount of $1,128 to Jensen Rock and Sand for work on the mill and overlay. Robin, back to you.
This is for the boulevard restoration behind the curbs that we replaced. We ended up replacing quite a bit more curb along this project, especially along Main Street, in order to make it look right and to have the ADA compliance. We recommend approval of the additional $1,128.
Move to approve that. Second. That's a final then, Robin? On that project? Yeah.
I've got a motion from Johnson and a second from Lunsman. Carl, can you get a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got the city bills, approved list of city bills for October 15th, 2019. As you see on your screen, can I get a motion to pay the bills?
Move to approve. Second.
A motion from Remley and a second from Olson. Carl, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Prior to the roll call vote, I would like to note that I did add one more bill to that we audited. So it is all good to pay. In fact, it's a interest payment for one of our bonds to U.S. Bank Corporate Trust in the amount of $88,309.38, just so everyone's aware of that.
Thank you, Carl. Would you take that roll call vote then, unless anyone has anything to ask about that bond payment?
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Abstain.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got payroll, possible approval of the pay period from September 29th through October 12th, 2019, and the city's share of Social Security, old age, and survivors insurance, retirement, health, and life insurance. Can I get a motion to make the payroll?
Move to approval.
That was fast. We got Remley and we've got Olson. Motion and second. Carl, can I get a roll call vote on making the payroll payment?
Councilmember Remley,
Aye.
Ronayne,
Aye.
Lunsman,
Aye.
Rife,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Bunceness,
Abstain.
Olson,
Aye.
Rux,
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next, we've got the city manager's report. Lynn, have you got some information for us?
Just one item. For the next meeting, which would be October 21st, I just wanted the public to let the public know that we were going to present the 2021 Promotion Fund budget process materials for review, and they could follow along if they go to our website and look at the agenda packet. Promotion Fund materials will include the application, a sample budget notification letter to organizations, a sample promotion fund allocation memo. And so the council wanted to review this, and I see there are 2 recipients in the audience tonight that might be interested in attending that hearing, and anyone else that gets promotion funds.
Thank you, Lynn. Anything else?
Question for Robin. I see we got North Klein opened up, a couple railroad crossings opened up. What about Third Avenue Bridge?
They are currently working on the approach pavements, and that the weather obviously threw us a curveball this past weekend, but they were working today on some of the approach pavements and some of the approach curb and gutter that is part of this project. So they're still shooting for the next couple weeks for completion.
South State Street?
South State Street, they are currently working on the sanitary sewer. I would hope within a couple weeks we'll have that open as well. And we did finish Harrod Street, so that is open.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah.
The road to nowhere.
The one snag that we do have right now, the water has not passed for North Klein. So they are still under temporary water, and that's why Second Avenue is closed on the west side of Klein Street, North Klein. So there's water that's been put in there temporarily served until that water line, the new water line, passes the bacterial testing. We cannot open that up. So it's that time of year where we're getting concerned. It's got to get done pretty soon. So,
And I'm not here to point fingers, but that Third Avenue Bridge is South Dakota DOT project, so might not be quite under. Robin can't crack the whip so hard on those fellas.
Right.
As it turns out, anything else before we adjourn?
The bike path up on 15th.
yes, they are continuing. They've gotten most of the work done to the east of State Street, and now they're continuing to the west of State Street. That is, obviously, the weather threw them a little bit of a loop too, but they came back and started opening things back up and working on that. So I'm hoping they have a good week and a half, and that should get them to J Street at least.
You should know, I checked with the construction engineer last Friday because we were getting complaints as to where people should park. Unfortunately, a lot of that pavement had only been poured as of Tuesday and Thursday of that week, and so there was no way that we could open that up. But they did go up there in what areas they had at least 7 days. They removed the barricades to provide a little bit more parking because of the problems associated with the snow. But it worked out overall, and I think probably we're going to lose a lot of barricades tomorrow too.
Mr. Olson?
Anyone have an update on the railroad crossings in the quiet zone? I see they were working up there.
And that was one that was actually delayed because of the weather as well. They wanted to open some of that stuff up on Wednesday, Thursday last week, and they chose not to just because it was going to end up being a bigger problem with all the barrels and everything. So they started back up on that again today, and hopefully they'll have at least one end done here in a couple days, and then they'll move on to the other side.
Thanks, gentlemen. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
A motion from Johnson, second from Bunceness. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?